Welcome to the Underwater Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of underwater portrait photography, cinematography, and everything in between. With me, your host, Brett Stanley. Welcome back to the Underwater Podcast, and this week I'm talking to Canadian photographer Meaghan Ogilvie. Meaghan is a fine art photographer, and whilst based in Toronto, she travels quite extensively, creating beautiful underwater images as she goes. She's shown her work in galleries worldwide, and we talk about what that process is like and how the pandemic has changed that landscape. Meaghan shares her visions of the future, and we talk about what it's like to spend a few weeks on a sailboat with other underwater artists. Alright, let's dive in. Meaghan, welcome to the Underwater Podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
How you doing? You're up in Toronto at the moment, right? So you're probably like cold.
Yes, I'm freezing. I think it's -9 today, so there's no diving right now for me.
Right. And that's -9 centigrade.
Yes. Yeah, it's freezing.
Yeah, it's below freezing. Yeah. Do you tend to do stuff during the winter up there?
Usually I travel in the winter, and because of COVID, that's not happening. So I'm really adapting to all the winter sports. And so there's a lot of hiking and snowshoeing and tobogganing, stuff like that.
So where would you be at this time of year? Where do you sort of travel to the same places, or are you sort of just going wherever takes you every year?
Wherever it takes me, yeah. I like the spontaneity of it.
Right. And are you traveling for work? Like, have you got clients you're traveling for, or are you just a sort of a self-traveler and then sort of shooting as you go?
Mostly a self-traveler, but there are opportunities that have come up for sure to travel for work. And I'm working on getting more of those after COVID, hopefully. But I love traveling. So as much as I can, I'll do it on my own dime just to experience different places, different types of water, from like to the sea or the ocean or in different parts of the world. I think it really helps with my underwater photography. Yeah,
I mean, your photography is it is almost kind of quite location based, right? Like it has a very open water feel, whether it's cenotes or whether it's lakes or whether it's the ocean. Is that something that you set out to do, or is it just something that's evolved from you traveling?
It's definitely been a gradual progression, because I did start photographing underwater in pools. And after I think about 3 or 4 years of that, I became a bit bored and I wanted to be challenged. So at the same time, I was starting to travel more and getting in the ocean. And so it just started to evolve within diving and then free diving. And then it just kept progressing. Right.
Yeah. And what sort of time frame are we talking? Like how long have you been shooting underwater for?
It feels like a while now. It is a while, since 2000. I feel old, but since 2007, I believe.
And so what started that? What was the catalyst?
My dad had a disease that it was quite rare. So I was trying to find a project that I could work on and create images that were really aesthetically different and striking. So I could use the images to hopefully grab people's attention and talk about his disease. And so around that time, underwater photography wasn't as accessible, I guess, as it is now, just in terms of the equipment you can acquire. And especially in Toronto, there's a lot of American companies who come here to film and do movies. But when I asked around, there were no tanks. There was nowhere to really accommodate an underwater shoot in the way that I envisioned it. So I just did all this research, and I realized I'd have to invest in an underwater housing if I wanted to do underwater images for this project for my dad, because I felt that underwater images would be just the most impactful. And so I literally jumped in the pool with some friend who's a stylist and a dancer, and we just created as we went, never having experience or anything. And the images did come out striking, and I was able to use the work to talk about my dad's disease. And that first and only shoot became the catalyst to use the beauty in my work to talk about issues that are important to me. And it really was the momentum to start my career and to move it forward.
That's amazing. And because your career has kind of involved a lot of conservation topics and other things as well. Is that right?
Yeah, it's mostly, I've tried to collaborate with a lot of conservation organizations. And also I did a project in 2015 with collaborating with Indigenous women to show and to appreciate how other cultures view water. And that was a really important, impactful time for me with my work and just personally. I learned about water, how it's important spiritually to other cultures. And yeah.
And so with that one, how did you kind of come up with that idea of joining those two things together, that kind of Indigenous kind of culture and water at the same time?
Again, that kind of happened organically, where I had been spending time just because I wanted to understand more clearly our connection to nature. And so I was spending time at an organization in Toronto, and it was Indigenous peoples, and they would teach about their culture, and you could sit in and just listen and observe. And so I was doing that at the time. And then I was approached about doing an exhibition for the Pan Am Games. And so the two came together, and their theme was water. So it all made sense. And one thing led to another.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm, it was great.
And so what gear did you start using when you sort of started? Was it stuff that you already had, or did you have to go and find stuff?
I definitely had to do a lot of research on the underwater housing, and I invested and purchased one. There was nothing available here in Toronto. So I just used, I think it was, I don't know which, maybe it was just the 5D, Canon 5D. And I think I borrowed half of the money from a boyfriend at the time, and I paid him back. And so I was able to purchase it. And yeah, that was very helpful. And then just experiment with it from there. So
how hard did you find the learning curve? Was it something that did you like the challenge of it, or was it more a kind of, I need to do this to get the result that I'm after?
I absolutely loved the challenge of it. I like being very active. So it was a way for me to move around a lot, a new way, just moving. So I don't say that I move eloquently, but like just following along with the model, moving in a very streamlined way and having a rhythm with them was something that I never experienced before. So I became quite addicted to that, and just being outside and really using the elements to create the work. I really love doing that.
Right. Yeah. And what sort of people are you working with? Because you said your first person was a dancer. Have you kind of stuck with that sort of technique with your other models and your other talent?
For the most part, yes. Just for their ability to really have control of their body. But I like working with really anyone. I think anyone can, once anyone's in water, they do become just more free and relaxed. So I've worked with non-dancers, but for the majority of my work, it's athletes or dancers.
And what are you doing to prepare them for it? Have they done underwater stuff before, or is this new to them as well?
A lot of the time it is new for them. So usually we take like about 15, 20 minutes to just get in the water together and just, get a sense of it, see like how we work together, how they move underwater, and then we go from there. But it depends too. If I'm setting up a shot and it's that kind of environment, then there is like a lot of back and forth. But if I'm just in the ocean and I'm following someone, I'm documenting it, which I think I prefer doing now this time in my career, then I'm just trying to keep up and like anticipate movements and directions and motions and light and everything. Yeah,
because I think your kind of more recent work has a little kind of editorial, documentarian style to it, as opposed to something that's been crafted. Would you feel that way?
Yes, I think in the beginning, the aesthetic for me was really important in terms of the styling and all of that. But over time, especially after working with and collaborating with the Indigenous women, it became more about stripping away a lot of the aesthetics or the styling and getting more into a raw place. And that's what I think I prefer, is just observing and rather than using, I think also in my work, I use one image as escapism and the stories in the one image. And now I'm more interested and focused on creating a series of images and storytelling in that way.
Yeah. And you tend to use quite a lot of black and white, like monochrome. Is that something that you're thinking about while you're shooting, or is that a very much a post-production kind of decision?
I think it might, for me, I think it's both. It depends on where I am, what I'm doing, what the light is like. But I think I'm coming out of that now. I'm not sure, but I have to say that I spent some time with 27 millimeter Enric Genet he's on Instagram, and obviously, and Alex Voyer and Marianne Aventurier on their sailboat on Diatomée. And on that trip, I learned a lot. And I think that's where things for me started to shift a bit. And they've had both their styles and the way that they work both influenced me in a way. So I think after that point in 2018, I believe, is when my work started becoming a little bit more editorial and somewhat graphic. And yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So were you influenced by those guys on the boat as well, or was it just the experience of that trip that kind of changed you a little bit?
Oh, it was definitely all of it. Yeah, that trip it changed my perspective on life, like what was important to me, and just being on the ocean. I mean, and seeing how like Enric, he lives by the ocean. He's in the ocean every day. That's how he creates his work. He's constantly literally immersed in his work. And Alex and Meaghan, they've made big choices and dedicated their life to being on the water by buying a sailboat, which they were fortunate to do. And so that really inspired me to really look at my life and what I wanted to do and how much more dedicated I want to be to underwater photography and enhancing my skills. And also obviously aesthetically, I didn't even know it was happening, but I was definitely influenced, especially by Enric. Right. I only realize it now looking back.
It's interesting, that sort of thing, isn't it? Where you've kind of picked something up by osmosis of just being around someone or being exposed to their work. And it's not until you kind of look back and go, oh, wow, that's like a benchmark that I've kind of put in there.
Yeah.
So how did that trip come about? Were you friends with those guys beforehand, or was it something that was organized just sort of through Instagram?
Yeah, I think it originally came from social media. So Alex and I had just been messaging and like learning from each other and just keeping in touch. It was probably a couple of years. And then he was talking about plans of getting the sailboat and how he wanted to bring artists on it and how he would love the opportunity if I came. And so it all worked out. And I mean, I didn't really know these people. So it was, it was a bit of a chance, but it really worked out. Yeah. And they're some of my favorite people. I hold them really dear to my heart. So it was a great experience.
That's amazing. I kind of, you kind of hear about artist retreats and stuff where artists kind of, go rent a cabin in the woods or something and go and kind of create together.
Right.
I hadn't really heard about that in terms of the underwater stuff, of getting on a boat and like helping each other evolve, I guess.
Yes, exactly.
That's beautiful. How long was the trip for?
It was in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and it was about 2 weeks. And later I joined them again right before the pandemic started. But in February 2020, I was in Panama with them around Bocas del Toro and the islands around there. So, yeah.
Great. Are they places that you've been to before? I mean, for me, looking at your work, it's hard to tell where everything is. Like it's not as the location's not baked into the image, if you know what I mean. Like some people I can look at and go, oh, that's definitely Bahamas. Whereas your work has a little bit more of mystery to it. Is that something you'd like to do as well? Or is it just how it happens?
I think it's just how it happens and how my style has evolved. I mean, I really love landscapes and just like showing more of an environment. And I think in the past, I guess I just haven't shown it. It's interesting. But I think my focus has been mostly on the people connected to the environments. And so the focus is more on them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, because the difference between you and, say, someone that, is like a free diving kind of photographer, I feel you're pushing in a lot closer into the subject as opposed to having the subject as part of the landscape.
Yes, for sure. I mean, there have been times where I think mostly in Tulum, just because the cenotes, for me, the landscapes are very interesting. So there were a lot of shots that I did there where there was more, I was pulled back further and there was more of a wide shot. But yeah, I think it might change though. My work is definitely changing right now. So I think I'm more interested in the environments now where the person is less of the primary subject.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're going back the other way now.
I think so, yeah.
Shifting. Yeah. Do you kind of know why that's happening, or is it just something that is just within you? It's just organically happening, or is there a conscious decision to do that?
I think it's both. I think when I feel I've kind of exhausted something or I've reached a point where I just need to be challenged again, then, I mean, now that you know what, also I just realized as we're talking, but if my free diving skills and my diving skills were stronger, then maybe I would have, you know, pulled back and been more comfortable to stay under longer and get more landscape. So maybe it's an effect of that. And now that my skills are getting stronger, then I'll be able to create different type of work that will show that, you know, I'm under for longer and I'm more in control.
And that's really interesting. Like, I think underwater and maybe like sports photography in terms of like, you know, like climbing or high alpine stuff is really dependent on your physical skills.
Right.
You know, I think it's interesting how much that affects the end result and how much it affects the aesthetic of the final image.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely, I think I've been frustrated in the past, especially being on the sailboat with Alex, Meaghan, and Enric. They were able to go so deep and I was down like maybe 5 meters. And so it was a bit frustrating for me. And I think that having that experience with them did inspire me to take it more seriously, take my skills more seriously, and become a better freediver and scuba diver. So I think it's just been, a conscious thing. And also it's just like an organic, if I want to create different kind of work or more complex work, then I need to get the skills to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think also the thing that I think you mentioned before is that sometimes you don't know you've evolved until you look back and see it in your work and you go, oh, wow, things are starting to change. I hadn't even really noticed, because you're so in the moment that you're not really seeing it. Like it's the forest for the trees, but a little bit further down the road, you look back and then you can see that kind of shift. Your work also has a very film-like aesthetic. It looks like it's been shot on 35 millimeter. Is that something that you've consciously done from the beginning, or had you started on film and sort of brought that aesthetic into your digital work?
I think I like the look of it. I do like the look of it. And I did start on film. So I went to college for photography, and it was an advertising program. So at that time, it was a long time ago, but at that time we were still learning on 4x5
Right.
film cameras. So it was, the old school. You really have to focus on pre-visualizing your shot and making sure that you don't waste money on that one 4x5 film piece of sheet film. And so I do come from that background, and I do miss it a lot. And more recently during this pandemic and having time to reflect and see where I want to go with my work in the future, I do see how much I miss a more tactile experience and taking more time in setting up a shot. So I think that that will also be something that's translating into my new work. But in the past, I guess, couple of years, I have really been drawn to that aesthetic again.
Right.
I shoot mostly digital underwater, but I've been shooting more on film on land.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. And then are you processing that yourself on land, or are you sending it off to a lab?
At the moment, I'm sending it off to a lab, but I would like to process it and also get into platinum palladium printing and getting my hands like right in there.
Yeah. Getting a more manual process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like that side of things. Like I come from a darkroom background.
Yeah.
But I have to say, like, if I was still doing that, I am so lazy that I don't think I would be a photographer anymore, because the amount of work that goes into that, it's just incredible. And I don't think people realize how much work would go into creating the final print back then, or still, like with that sort of process, and even talking about plates and all that sort of stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's so much work. You definitely need patience, which I think personally I've just stopped taking the time sometimes to really figure out what I want to do. I just kind of get into it and I move with it kind of intuitively, which I like, but I would kind of like to set things up too and think about the actual print in the end, right? Like think about how am I shooting now? How is that going to affect the way that I present it in the end?
Right. And are you thinking about things like paper stock and the inks and all that sort of stuff as well now?
Yeah. Yeah. Like with the platinum palladium, I've been doing a lot of research about the chemicals, what types of paper to use, and also using liquid light, which is a way of basically painting an emulsion on any kind of surface, like anything. And then in the darkroom, you can then project your negative onto that surface that you've coated, and in the emulsion, and then you have your print, but it can be literally on anything, like a rock. And I'm really looking forward to that kind of experimentation as well.
I love that because it's kind of mixed medium already, because you're basically projecting your image onto a medium that is not flat. Right. And you're probably going to get, a very different distorted kind of effect, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I do remember hearing about liquid light back in when I was doing darkroom stuff 15, 20 years ago. And I never got to work with it, but it was always something that I was like, oh, that would be amazing. Like if you had like pottery or, anything that this would stick to. And then it basically kind of develops the image on it. It's a very cool idea.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering like how taking underwater images, maybe with film, and going through that whole process with it, like how different that would be. And I don't know if I would prefer it. I don't know. I'm going to try it out.
That sounds great. And do you like the idea of kind of not knowing what you're going to get? Like, do you like that sort of like unknown, or are you someone who sort of plans every step of the way?
My process is definitely more intuitive. So I like the unknown. I like being spontaneous. I think that's why I like shooting outside and in the ocean. And obviously I have an understanding over time of how light will interact with people and the surface and everything, but I like to be surprised. And I think some of my best images have come from either like mistakes. I've set out to do something and it's turned out a different way, or just like working with someone and letting them and myself not have too many parameters and just work together in a more organic way.
Right. Yeah. That's beautiful. I mean, you've done gallery shows and had your work shown. What was that process like? Was that something that you kind of pushed for from your end, or were galleries coming to you and kind of offering to show your work?
I definitely pushed for it in the beginning. So when I graduated from the photography program that I said was advertising based, I realized quickly when I graduated that I was definitely more of an artist, and not so commercial. So I didn't know how to get into the art world in Toronto in particular. And so I started doing art fairs, and that really gave me a lot of good experience and exposure. And from there, I think I did that for maybe like 8 years. And then from there, then the galleries started noticing my work, and then the opportunity to create the exhibition for the Pan Am Games, that also came from exposing my work through the art fairs. And really like one thing just kind of led to another, and it grew. And then like getting international exposure also helped. So through competitions and showing my work. So it all kind of just like seeded into different places on its own after I put my work out there in the beginning.
How do you like the gallery side of things? Because I mean, it is such an investment in time and money to sort of get all these things printed and up on the walls. Do you feel like you're sort of putting yourself on display for feedback and criticism, or do you like that kind of interface with the public?
That's a good question because it's a very vulnerable position to be in. And when I first showed my work, the very first year, I got a lot of criticism. It wasn't underwater work. It was a different kind of work. And I got a lot of criticism, and it was hard, but I tried to take that criticism and learn from it. And that's the attitude I've kind of had the whole way. So obviously no one wants to, after you've worked really hard on something and now you're exposing it to everyone, no one wants to hear hurtful things, but I just have to remember that everyone has their opinion, and whatever people take from it, they will take from it. So I think that it's a nice opportunity to share work, and especially like my work usually has a message behind it. So if I have the opportunity to share it and I can have conversations with people one-on-one rather than through a gallery, like have that barrier of a gallery. That's why I did the art fairs too, because I was one-on-one with people. And in the end, I really liked that, having those conversations and being able to express my work one-on-one with people, the public.
Did you find that it sort of gave you a bit of a thicker skin as well, that you could process that kind of feedback and make it into a good thing rather than sort of just feeling kind of hurt by it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some years I would sell everything and some years I wouldn't sell anything. So it did hurt my ego, but whatever. I did build a thicker skin to learn from it, and it's helped. It's really helped me just in all aspects of my life, really, just to be in that kind of vulnerable place, but then do my best to use that to move forward and to make better work or to take on bigger challenges. Because without those experiences, I wouldn't have been able to.
No, and I think that's a good kind of point as well. And I've had a few other guests kind of say the same thing, is that, if everyone tells you your work is amazing, you never grow. You need the people to kind of go, well, this could be better, or I don't like this, for you to then kind of process that, work out if that's even helpful to you, but then turn it into something good.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting to hear people's perspectives. Everyone comes from a different place and has their own experiences. So it's interesting to hear why they like or dislike something.
Well, I think that's a good point too. And what I find in this whole social media kind of age that we live in is that when you post something online, most of it, 95% of the feedback you get is one word or two words. It's like, oh, this is amazing, or I love this, or great, or, meh, or whatever.
Right.
But you never find out why. And I always want to know the why. Like I'm in a few kind of Facebook groups for underwater photographers, and I'm trying to start this kind of groundswell, I guess, of don't just say one word. Say something particular about the image. Why do you like it? Why don't you like it? Because everything else is not really helpful. It doesn't help you kind of grow.
No, that's good. You know what? Like I do. Yeah, I find social media is great for so many reasons, but I think we do lack sometimes genuine contact with it. And yeah, it would be helpful. I mean, now that you said that, I'm going to think about when I comment on people's pictures about being more honest and explain more why I like it. I probably won't say why I dislike it, because I usually like something and then comment.
Yeah. You don't comment if you don't like it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to do it myself, and I find myself, I slip back into the one word kind of responses a lot, just because social media is so short attention span and it's so flippant. But I do, when I see someone's work, then I really want them to understand why I liked that thing, or why I think I didn't like this thing. Not that it's bad, but I thought this could be better in my opinion, from my point of view. And everyone's point of view is different. No one can please everyone. Not everyone's going to like your work.
No.
Are you doing online prints and stuff as well? Like, are you selling work outside of galleries?
Yes. So actually I'm not, this is the whole thing, but I'm not represented by a gallery, and I never have. And I made that choice. I mean, that might change at this point, but I made that choice earlier on because the people who had been doing it for quite a while that I was looking up to, or they were just within my circles, I just felt that they weren't getting the support or the proper attention that their work needed in order to sell. Like, you're almost like the big thing for a bit of time and then you're not. And so I just felt that I could I'm fine with working as hard as I can. So I was fine with trying my best to get my work out there and try to do it myself. I mean, I think that was very difficult, but it worked out in certain ways and not in others. But I do sell my work on my own. So people will usually just find me from my website and then contact me, or I have art consultants that I check in with constantly, not constantly, but on occasion. And then there's different avenues to take to connect with people and organizations to sell your work.
Right. What do you if someone was getting into selling their work now, what advice would you give them? What sort of path would you recommend?
It's very different now. So I'm actually researching and trying to understand at this point. And COVID is also changing everything. The way that art galleries work, and everyone's gone online now. And with social media, a lot of artists are selling their work themselves. And so the whole dynamic of the art world is changing. Prices are dropping. Like, there's just a whole different change in it. So if they're starting out, I would say see what other artists are doing, just to get a sense of how many years they've been doing it, what's their track record, how much they're charging for that, and what kind of clients that they have, if like where you want to target your work, and see again what price point that surrounds. But from the more like artsy art world of it, your credentials are really important. So if you do artist residencies, if you do exhibitions, like all that kind of thing, it really encompasses and supports your track record and where you are in your career and how much you can sell your work for and all that kind of thing. So I think just doing research and seeing what other artists are doing would be a good way to start and see what you want your target market to be. If it's just people on social media, then that is different than wanting to get like art collectors and work with art consultants and stuff like that. I mean, the two can merge, but there is a difference between the two worlds as of right now. Might change.
Yeah. So are you doing any education stuff? Are you running any workshops or anything? Or are you more concentrating on your own work?
Right now I'm concentrating on my own work. I feel I have a lot more to learn before I start teaching. And I do have plans and dreams of eventually, maybe within the next 5 to 10 years, maybe longer, I'm not sure, but purchase a sailboat or a boat and bring kind of like what Dia Tome is doing, but maybe more locally here in Toronto for the beginning, and bring youth on the boat to just teach them, help give them a better connection to water. And so they can, because there's lots of kids or youth. I think there's a liability if you bring actually like very young children onto boats. So if they're a little bit older, it might be better. But just trying to like take them from areas where there's like literally no water and then bring them to water and hopefully help them have like a good relationship with swimming, with learning about the species, and maybe creating things together with them so that they can have a more of appreciation. And I think if that happens, then in the future, like who knows if their professional career will then have something to do with protecting water, or they'll maybe think twice about polluting. I just think that if a connection starts younger, then it might be better. So that's a goal of mine, is to create a program or something like that to help have a better connection for the kids.
Right. So not necessarily about underwater photography, but just about water in general and having a relationship with it outside of that.
I think so, yeah. I mean, it may turn into underwater photography, but we'll see.
Yeah. That's really nice. I think that's beautiful. And speaking to other people and in other parts of this industry as well, I feel like the whole conservation side of things kind of needs to come from that early age, creating that relationship with the ocean and with water. And as water becomes more scarce, I think that's going to be the hot commodity in the next coming decades. Water is going to be more precious than gold.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was collaborating with the Indigenous women, like that was a lot of what we spoke about and what we understood. And it was really when I changed my perspective on everything, and I really wanted to use my work in whatever way I could to help bring awareness or to educate. I'm still working on how to do that. Like, I think the beauty in work can bring attention and start conversations and everything, but I'm going to be doing an underwater cinematography course when all of this opens up again, and in Australia. And I would really like to use that skill to do documentaries and really get into it further. Like I'm taking advanced diving course first, rescue diving course, and then just really getting comfortable with scuba, and then going to this course hopefully in early 2022 and getting the skills and then starting my new path. Yeah.
You're kind of spending a lot of time now upskilling. So you're bringing yourself up to another level so that you can do these projects that you want to do. That's great. I think that's a great use of the COVID pandemic. I think a lot of people are going to come out of this pandemic way more skilled than they went in, which is awesome.
Yeah, really good bread makers. Everyone's making bread. But there's lots
banana
of
bread, French bread, sourdough, all that sort of stuff. Are you doing much commercial work? Like, are you kind of working for brands, or are you selling your images to brands to be used for commercial stuff?
Funny you ask, Brett, because that's another direction that I'm really pushing in the next couple of months, because my background is commercial. And although I went the art route, now I'm at a point in my life in my career where if I can also create commercial work, obviously it helps financially, then that will help me work towards all of these things that I aspire to do to help support them. So I'm within Toronto. Yeah, there's some brands that I've been approaching, and more like lifestyle, sports, that kind of realm of things, because of the work that I've done has been within that context.
Yeah, I was going to say, because a lot of the work I'm seeing is, it has that editorial sport side of things, but it's not, but it's still got the artistic side of it. It's not like a document. It's still got some creativity to it. It's really nice.
Mm-hmm, thank you.
Was water for you, was that something that you kind of grew up with? Did you have a fascination for it, or did it really just start with when you wanted to do that project for your father?
Oh no, water's been such a huge part of my life ever since I was quite young. It was one of my happiest places to be. Like during the summers, my family would rent cottages. We go to our friends' cottages and we spend time on the lakes. And I was definitely a water baby, where my mom would be yelling at me to come in, and I pretend I didn't hear her. And
yeah, well, you can't hear underwater, so
No, I can't hear at all. And I'd come in and my lips would be blue, but I could have stayed out longer. So I definitely always loved water, and my dad did too. So that was also kind of an important connection with that series. I don't think I really explained that well, but my dad and I, like, good memories that we shared were surrounding water. So it was a good subject to work with.
Yeah. And had you kind of thought about doing underwater before that project, or was it just something that sort of came up then, that was the light bulb moment?
It just came up then, but it was also around the time of, so when I was thinking of what could I use as a subject matter, what kind of environment could I shoot in to make it very different or like really striking. And around the same time, that movie 300 came out. Do you remember that movie?
Yeah,
2007.
This is Sparta.
Yep. And they had shot it in, at least at that time for me, it seemed like a very new way where they would like speed it up, slow it down in editing. And then there was that scene with the Oracle. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, the Oracle's kind of floating in the air. And
I saw her movement, and it was obviously very ethereal and beautiful, and she's kind of suspended there, and it was really captivating. And so that, I think, stuck in my head a bit. And so when I was researching on what to do, I think that kept popping in, and I realized that they had shot it in water. And so then that kind of led. So I was inspired by that. That was a pretty important visual to see for me.
Yeah. So the visual of it, not so much the idea that they were in water, but the effect that the water gave.
Yes.
You're not the first person to tell me this.
Really?
That Oracle scene, I think, has changed a few people's lives.
Oh, wow. I'm glad that other people were inspired, because it was, at the time, it was like, wow.
Yeah. It was pretty good. I remember that movie Sparta, and as you say, it was that effect that they were doing with the kind of the speed up and then slow down to ultra slow, and it was kind of groundbreaking.
It was, really inspiring.
Well, I mean, with that sort of stuff in mind, where do you find inspiration? Are you getting inspiration from movies like that, or what sort of sources are you using to get inspired and motivated?
It's also a good question, because, I mean, definitely it comes from social media, because we're inundated every day, right? We see so much of whatever we want to see, really. But I'm starting to take more breaks from it, because I'm finding I would like, as inspired as I am on there, I'm seeing a lot of repetition. So I'm trying to reach outside in like real life and take on inspiration from there. And that could mean going to see, I mean, it's hard with COVID too, but like going for a walk in a place I haven't been before in nature. Like nature is my biggest inspiration. And just watching the light in a place that I've been so many times, but seeing how it changes that place at different times. Or, I mean, music is a huge one. When I listen to music, I'm always searching for new music. And when I listen to music, I get immediate visuals. So I really just like sitting and listening and just visualizing. And I mean, inspiration for me does come from everywhere, from architecture, from something I've read, seeing compassion in people. Like, it's just so many different places, but I'm trying to find it more so now outside of social media, just to broaden it a bit, I think. For me.
I think that's great though. I mean, because when people sort of think of inspiration, I think they think of, like specific visual things, but having, the music kind of transport you to somewhere else. And so you're being inspired by some music, and then that's creating visuals in your head. I think, the people forget about that sort of inspiration. Yeah,
I highly recommend. I did an interview a while ago, and someone asked me, like, what's do you have any advice for people starting out or something? And I actually said, at the time I really felt it, like maybe like step back from social media for a bit and just try to find, like, get out there in the world. And during COVID, it's hard, obviously, but like just get out in your neighborhood and just kind of observe and pay attention to things.
Yeah. It's interesting how I could do a whole podcast on inspiration, but, you know, like with things like social media and Instagram and, you know, the explore tab, and you end up kind of, as visual artists, we look at other visual things and get inspired by them. But I think it's not as distilled as something that's been germinated inside your own imagination. You know, like I'll read a line in a book, and just the way those 5 words went together will spark something in me, which, you know, is that whole Pandora's box of, oh, wow, I could do this. And I feel like there's a rush with that. There's a beauty or a purity with that hasn't been visually entered into your brain, but it's come from inside you. It's
exciting. I like live for those moments where you feel that rush of creativity. And and you just want to create.
And it's usually like 3 o'clock in the morning and you just can't do anything about it.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. Or you're just like stepping out of the shower, you don't have a pen and paper, you got nothing.
Exactly, yeah. And that's when I kind of, I get antsy, I kind of get frustrated because I just want to do this thing now. I remember years ago I was traveling in India and I was in the middle of nowhere, and this was kind of, the age of internet cafes and all that sort of stuff. And I had all these ideas while I was out in the middle of nowhere, and all I wanted to do was go home and create them. But I just had to kind of, squirrel them away and hope that I could remember what they were about, weeks later when I came back.
Do you find that when that happens, do you remember them? Because I find it's hard. It's hard to like get that initial gut feeling.
No, it's like when you wake from a dream, that instant you wake up, it's so clear as a bell. But minutes later, it's kind of this distant echo. I feel like it's all wrapped up in the emotion you have when you have that idea. That's what kind of, that's the groundswell. That's what pushes you along. And then later on, you're kind of like, yeah, I guess that was a good idea, but I don't know.
That's so true. Yeah.
It's interesting. And there was someone on Facebook the other day who said, imagine how many great works of art are sitting in photographers' reject file folders. Just because they didn't like it that day, it got rejected.
So true.
So much artwork.
Do you ever go back in your old work and discover things again? Because like the way you see things will be different, and maybe you have a different mood.
Absolutely. Yeah. I look back at stuff and, now I've learnt different skills in terms of editing and composition and stuff. And I go back and look at work and go, oh, wow, I could have totally used this for something else. Or because I think, especially with the final result of, editing, and depending on where, regardless of how much retouch work you do, how you feel about an image is determined by your mood at that time. So if you're, if you're angry and you're selecting images, that's going to change depending on if you're in love, it's going to change everything. So everything's subjective.
Yeah.
So I think there's so much work that we've missed because we're in the wrong mood.
It's true. Yep.
It's kind of sad to think about it though.
I know. But I mean, it's good. It's hard sometimes when I find like when I've worked on a project, I'm ready for the next thing. I'm ready to move on. And so it's easy to just like push everything away because I'm always eager to keep going and moving forward. But sometimes it's good to really get immensely into something before you move on.
Oh yeah. I find myself envious of these artists like sculptors and painters and all this sort of stuff who spend years on one thing. Like I couldn't, my attention span is too short. But I look at some of my work and go, well, you probably should have spent a couple more minutes on that, but it might have actually been a lot better. But these people who just will not release something until they think it is absolutely perfect.
Oh, yeah.
I admire that.
Yes, they do have trouble. I have a lot of painter friends. They do have trouble with letting it go, where they'll just add another brush stroke. Yeah. They'll come back to it and it will never end. So they have trouble with letting it go, I think.
I guess that would be a thing too, where you've kind of touched it up or played with it too much, and then you've gone past where you wanted to be, and you've kind of overshot the mark. That's very interesting. Meaghan, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah,
no problem.
It's been
Thank
great.
you. Enjoyed talking with you. Thank you for this.
Oh, anytime. Yeah. And, thanks for sharing your work online. And I look forward to seeing where you evolve.
Thank you. I can't wait to get going on it when things open up again.
I know. Well, we will speak to you soon and see what you've been up to.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening, everyone. And as always, if you like the podcast, please subscribe, review, and share. If you'd like to support the production of these episodes, you can purchase our very cool merchandise at theunderwaterpodcast.com. We've got branded coffee mugs, stickers, beer cozies, and posters featuring our amazing illustration and logo by Joe Hodino. If you'd like to connect with us or learn more about our guests, you can reach us at theunderwaterpodcast.com or on Instagram. We also have a Facebook group where you can discuss the episodes and even get your questions answered by the guests. There's a link to it in the show notes. You can learn more about my underwater photography workshops and mentoring at brettstanley.com or Brett S Photo on Instagram. The Underwater Podcast is presented and produced by me, Brett Stanley, and our music is Neo by Oh Boy. Keep creating, everyone. I'll see you in the water.